right, now let's move on to Giovanni.
The man with the glasses?
Yes, it's me. Knowing all the journalist restrictions you mentioned on the press conference before, how would you encourage this new generation of journalists to continue pursuing this beautiful career?
Woo. Well, you know what I would do if I was starting a career in journalism is I'd intern to as many journalistic places that you might think are so old school you'd never want to participate in. So just think about it. What are the 3 places that focus on journalism in Honduras or in the region that you say, that is so old school, I would never go there? Don't say it out loud, because we're recording. But if you then try to intern at each and every one of them. It's a lot like when, sorry, I keep on talking here, but Giovanni's like, cut! But what I did when I was interested in advertising, for instance, I went to work at the largest advertising company in the United States. But I also, before I did that, went to the most creative, sort of like what might be seen as the Vice News, right, in the United States, right? And I went to the Vice News, and basically the head of Vice News said, Richard, go out and work for this old school company first, then come back to me. So that you understand the basics. Like, what does it mean to work for what the idea of old school was? And so I went to go work for what was thought to be old school. It wasn't old school, by the way, but you know what I mean. And I learned that I really didn't like advertising. But I understood the lesson he was teaching me. He said, you know, get the basics down first. So I would say, if you're interested in journalism, there's so many different pieces of it, as you know. But I think if you can go through that experience, you'll not only take away some really good stuff from really wise journalists, hopefully experienced journalists, right? War correspondents, you know, political beats that have been doing it for decades. They can teach you things about attitude, content, context, belief. Do you want to look and be like them when you're a journalist of that, you know, experience? You may say yes, and you may say no.
All right, now it's Rene's turn to make a question.
Looking back at your career, what would you say was the moment that made you think, I chose the right career, I chose the right major, I am doing journalism because I love it?
A lot of my bosses would say I should have looked back a long time ago. But I would say that when I was reporting on, in the United States we had protests in the street in the last 4 to 5 years. And these protests were related to civil rights. And they were very similar to what happened in the United States in the 1960s, during the days of Martin Luther King, right? Of equality for all, right? Didn't matter who you are, whether you were purple or green or 10 feet tall or 2 feet tall, 3 meters tall or half a meter tall, did not matter. And when I was reporting on these protests of individuals that were not being, and felt like they were not being treated equally, it reminded me of when I started in journalism. Not the newsletter, but when I first had to stand in front of a camera. And that was in the United States, the Rodney King beating that was caught on tape in Los Angeles. It was about 25 years ago. And there I was standing in the streets 25 years later, or 20 years later, and I was telling the same story of a person being beaten on camera. When you see that and you feel how, like I was asking, what's happening in the country? Why are we allowing this? What's the problem that we still have 25 years later, right? Then I knew that I not only was telling a story that is of our history, but it's also a story of me. A story of what many people who have gone through what they feel is persecution, and is persecution, and being able to tell that story accurately and to bring their story out with honor and with respect and with facts and context. I happen to be that guy that could give a little bit of context, because I was there the first time we ever had a video of somebody that was beaten on camera in the United States. But unfortunately I was doing it again and again and again 20, 25 years later.
Thank you.
All right, so now it's Alejandro's turn.
So Richard, it's
Yes.
a pleasure to have you here.
Honor to be here.
The last question is pretty simple.
Yeah.
Who is Richard Lui?
Yes, good question. I am a person that I believe is really lucky. Just lucky from beginning to end. I was a kid that grew up poor, not well off. We had in the United States what's called food stamps. You get stamps and you go get food, and benefit of a welfare system. My grandfather and grandmother came to the United States illegally. And here I am, the grandson of those two illegal immigrants that came to the United States. And so really my last name isn't Louis. It's Wong, W-N-G. My real name's Richard Wong. And that's because my grandparents bought the name Louis so that come to the United States. So I really have the Wong name. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate. Thank you. Thank you. The one guy that got that joke. You got it. But given my grandparents, given how difficult it was, financially for me growing up, I almost flunked out of high school twice. And making it through all of that, and knowing that my grandfather came to the United States because he was a poor rural farmer and lived very close to the poverty line, that he came to the United States because without ever knowing that he's going to have a grandson, I knew he was saying, I don't want you to be me. I don't want you to become a poor farmer. So for me, it's really kind of cool because here I am, just 2 generations later, his grandson. And I'm lucky enough to become a news anchor and a journalist for 2 great national and international companies. And I now can tell his story. I'm not a poor rural farmer. I'm this person that stares into a camera. And now I understand that it's no longer that I can tell a story, but I must tell his story. And so that's part of who I am. And that's what I try to bring to my storytelling.
Thank you.
I would say that's also part of your legacy and his legacy.
Yeah.
What will become in the future. Also, well, you've been familiar with the immigrants crossing the border, the Honduran immigrants. How do you feel about that? Knowing, well, now that we know the background of your grandfather, how do you think they should handle in the States the fact that a lot of Hondurans are trying to enter the country? Not only Hondurans, but Central Americans.
When I did a story when I first joined CNN about this, because it's not new that we have the issue of immigration in North America, right? That we were thinking about how do we handle Central North America. And I asked the question, because I did a story of a person just like me. And I asked her, I said, you must be conflicted because your grandfather committed a crime. Do you want him to commit a crime? I'll answer for her because I know I did not want him to commit a crime. It's a law, but it's also what it is. This is who I am. This is who he was. It also brought to light that there were laws in place at the time that were not appropriate. It was the only law passed that rejected a specific ethnicity and a specific nationality, Chinese. It was in 1882, called the Chinese Exclusion Act. All of that brought to light the fact that mistakes are made and things need to change. But sometimes it's only history that tells us what works and what doesn't work, what is right and what's wrong. I will never say that he and anybody else should break a law. No. But if the law is inappropriate, do we go to legislate in our Congress, in our Parliament? Do we talk to our leaders to adjust them based on who we are? Well, that's the power of democracy, right? And so what's happening now with Central North America and our issues of immigration, I think that we have been looking at solutions for a long time. And most critics in the United States will say, Congress, how come you can't fix this? Because this benefits not only the United States, it benefits all of our countries that we're talking about in this room and that we represent. And I think that is the dynamic when critics look at immigration and how to address it. Can't we fix it, is what the critics say. We've been debating it for not 5 or 10 or 20 or 30 or 40 years. I just gave the example of my grandfather. They've been debating it forever, since the very beginning. But nevertheless, it's still what makes that country unique because of the number of countries, because of my grandfather's story, because of that hope that it represents.
The American dream.
I hope so, yes. It definitely, I'm glad that guy Well, I'm glad that he was able to have children and then have more children because I got lucky.
Well, I would like to ask everybody over here if they want to make another question right now.
I would like to add something up. Now that you've touched the family, I've read that your father currently suffers Alzheimer's.
Yes.
I identify with it. My grandfather passed away with it, and now I'm just asking.
Sorry about that,
Yeah, thank you. How do you realize when you, as a journalist, are making a stand and actually making a change about something that is not currently talked about or something that people are not trying their best to find a solution? Do you consider that as a journalist, are you making a stand?
I am human. I am a journalist. Second. And as a human, I'm a son. That comes before the journalism stuff. And if anybody were to stand, so for instance, I also am an ambassador for causes like anti-human trafficking, for issues related to gender equality, with issues related to, for instance, a campaign here with Plan International Honduras, which is called Niños con Igualdad. And the purpose of all of that is to give opportunity, regardless of gender, and especially for girls and women, a full opportunity. Not awareness, but equip the system, and not just equipping women or girls, but equipping the society, so that we can look at everybody and say, you have the equal opportunity. I have a lot of privilege being a man, so do you. And you need to understand that when you walk into a room, you have privilege. And I bet for the two of you, Andrea and Alejandra, you sit there and guys walk in, and if I were to say they have male privilege, you would probably go, I got that. Yep, I see it. But I don't know if you know that, do you?
Yes, it's noticeable here.
Would you ever say that that is good?
No, of course not.
All right. Would you ever say that human trafficking is good?
No, absolutely
Okay.
not.
Would you ever say that dementia and Alzheimer's is good?
No, for sure
Okay.
no.
So I feel that today in our modern world that we're allowed as journalists to be human number one. Now, to have opinions that may be controversial, that's a different issue, right? That journalistically, you and I could debate for a long time. But I think there's some causes that we all can care about that make sense, right? Because we're humans first.
Excellent. So, does anybody have another question? Well, Ricardo, please.
Okay,
Ricardo.
Yeah. What advice would you give, well, to us that we are the journalists to be?
Mhm.
And have you ever thought about, when you were studying to be a journalist,
Yeah.
about leaving journalism?
Yeah. Well, are you thinking of leaving already?
No.
Okay, good. Just checking. The things about the career choices you make are often difficult. And I would suggest what I found that works so well for me in deciding my career path. And because we're journalists in this room, this should be easy, yet journalists seldom do it. And that is to write down where you want your career to be. So every year, you go to your Word document or whatever else you're using, and you write down in 2 years the 3 things that you might want to be or do professionally. Do that every year, and then write out the steps. And maybe it's not only professionally, but maybe it also includes what you want to do in the community. And I would suggest that you do something in the community, because as journalists you have a unique ability and a unique responsibility, because you are telling stories for not just yourself or your family, but for Honduras, right? And that's important to do.
Perfect. So, first of all, I think we would all like to thank you as part of the community of Ceutec for you coming over here. It's really important for us.
Yeah.
We have another competition, which is Unitec, which is kind of our big brother.
Ah.
Usually you would have gone there, but today you're with us. And the whole community thanks you for that.
Oh, thank you for having me. I
We
appreciate
thank
it.
our viewers also for watching this show today. And I want to thank you personally for, giving your point of view and motivating people to study journalism, but also to avoid fake news and try to start with the other part of the people that should not make fake news. As you said before, Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton benefited a lot from that, and the actual president in Honduras and in way other countries around the globe also benefit from that. So I think it's very important for you to show us this path that we need to follow in the end. Also thank our companions today, Giovanni, Rene, Alejandra, Andrea, and Ricardo for asking the questions. And wish you a good trip and hope that you still enjoy your last time over here in
I will
Honduras.
definitely, Rodrigo. Thank you so much. Yeah.
I also hope
Yes,
that
I will.
We will all have jobs in NBC soon, I hope.
Yes. And keep on watching this show.
Well,
Thank you.
goodbye, viewers, and we hope that you enjoyed the show.